Emma had always believed that her life was safe, predictable, and filled with quiet joys, the kind that come from shared routines and small comforts. Married to Jason, her high school sweetheart, she enjoyed the comfort of a life built on familiarity, lazy Saturday mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings curled up watching old movies, and the gentle rhythm of a home that felt like a sanctuary. But one rainy afternoon, everything shifted in a way she could never have anticipated. She had left work early, tired and restless, craving the quiet of her own home, and when she stepped inside, the living room felt different, almost charged with tension. She froze in the doorway, eyes catching a sight that made her stomach twist and her heart pound violently. Margaret, her mother-in-law, usually the epitome of composure and grace, was leaning close to a man Emma did not recognize, laughing in a way that was intimate, familiar, and shockingly out of place. Their hands brushed, their smiles lingered too long, and Emma realized in that instant that she had stumbled upon something private, something that didn't belong in the open, something that could change everything she thought she knew about her family. Her first instinct was to scream or confront, to demand answers, but a strange, icy calm took over her. She retreated silently, letting the moment imprint itself on her memory, knowing that any reaction could ruin the fragile balance of her household. That night, alone in her bedroom, rain tapping against the window, Emma replayed the scene endlessly. Every detail came back, the curve of Margaret's smile, the way the man's voice had lowered when he spoke to her, the soft familiarity in their gestures, and each replay brought a new wave of shock, disbelief, and an unsettling mixture of anger and sorrow. Questions cascaded in her mind like an unstoppable storm. How long had this been going on? How could she have been blind to it before? Would Jason ever find out, and if he did, what would that mean for their marriage, for their family, for her own sense of trust? Emma's chest tightened as she imagined confrontations, awkward family dinners, whispered accusations, and the irrevocable shift in the way she would see Margaret forever. Yet, alongside the dread and fear, there was also a flicker of something else, a strange, almost strategic thought that perhaps knowledge, though heavy and painful, could be wielded carefully, turned into a tool to protect what mattered most. She wondered if, by keeping this secret, she could prevent harm, guide her mother-in-law toward better choices, and somehow maintain the fragile peace of her family life. The complexity of her emotions was dizzying, betrayal mingled with empathy, anger tangled with a deep understanding of human longing, and a sense of responsibility settled over her like a weight she had never anticipated carrying. Sleep eluded her as she thought about every possible scenario, every conversation that might have to be held in the coming days, every glance that might now carry unspoken tension. Even as the storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside her, Emma felt a strange awareness settling in, that life was never as simple as she had believed, that people, even those she trusted most, carried desires, mistakes, and secrets that could upend everything. And as dawn crept slowly over the horizon, spilling pale light into her room, Emma realized she was standing on the edge of a new reality. One where choices would be difficult, where silence could be both a shield and a burden, and where the next step she took might not only determine the stability of her marriage but also shape the very nature of her relationships with those closest to her. The quiet, safe life she had taken for granted now seemed fragile, almost illusory, and yet, deep inside, she felt a strange determination forming. She would navigate this carefully. She would watch, she would learn, and she would choose wisely. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. The familiar corners of her home, the echoes of laughter she had once trusted, and even the gentle routine of her days now carried an undercurrent of tension and uncertainty, a reminder that even the strongest bonds could be shaken by a single, unexpected revelation. Emma's heart ached for the innocence that had been lost, for the simplicity that had been shattered in one brief, electric moment. And yet, alongside the ache was a flicker of courage, a sense that perhaps she could turn this shock into something meaningful, that she could protect those she loved, and maybe even guide her mother-in-law toward a path of honesty and redemption. She knew that the days ahead would be delicate, filled with choices that mattered more than she had ever realized, and with every thought, every heartbeat, Emma felt the weight of what she had seen settle more firmly into her bones. Life, she understood now, was a complicated web of hidden desires, fragile truths, and quiet decisions, and she was standing at the center of it all, forced to decide how much she could bear, how much she could forgive, and what she was willing to risk to preserve the family she had worked so hard to love. And as she finally closed her eyes, exhaustion heavy in her limbs, Emma felt a strange mixture of fear, sorrow, and resolve. She knew that the moment she had witnessed would haunt her, shape her, and demand her careful navigation of truth and silence. Nothing in her life would ever be the same again, but in that realization, there was also a tiny spark of power, the knowledge that, for now, the future was in her hands, and that her next steps could either shatter her world completely or guide it toward a fragile, careful peace. The days after that rainy afternoon were a whirlwind of tension and quiet observation for Emma, who couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen yet knew she had to act carefully. She moved through her routines with the same outward calm, but every glance at Margaret, every laugh shared with Jason, carried the weight of her secret. Emma noticed subtle changes in her mother-in-law, an unusual restlessness, a nervous glance at her phone, and moments when Margaret's smile seemed forced, almost guilty. Emma's mind raced with questions and what-ifs, but she kept herself in check, refusing to confront or speak until she understood the situation fully. Then, one evening, Margaret asked her to help in the kitchen, ostensibly to discuss family plans for the upcoming weekend. Emma hesitated, but curiosity and the need for clarity drew her in. The moment she stepped inside, the atmosphere felt charged, thick with unspoken tension, and Emma could see Margaret struggling with her composure, hands fidgeting, eyes shifting as if searching for words. "Emma," Margaret said softly, almost hesitantly, "I know what you saw that day. I don't want it to ruin everything. I need your help." Emma's heart skipped, a mix of apprehension and intrigue flooding her senses. "Help?" She listened carefully as Margaret began to explain, revealing a truth Emma had only glimpsed. The affair had been a mistake born out of loneliness, a desperate attempt to feel alive again, a misguided search for attention and connection. Margaret's voice trembled as she confessed her fear of losing her family, of the shame that might come if Jason or anyone else discovered the truth. Emma felt a strange mix of anger and empathy. She had expected arrogance or denial, but instead, she saw vulnerability, a human side to the woman she had always considered untouchable and perfect. Margaret's words hung in the air as she made her request. She needed Emma's silence, a promise not to reveal the secret, and in return, she would make amends, rebuild trust where it had been broken, and protect the family they both loved. Emma's mind raced with possibilities. This was dangerous, yes, but it also gave her a strange sense of control and purpose. She realized that she could use this knowledge not to punish, but to guide Margaret toward honesty and reconciliation, to ensure that mistakes did not destroy the lives around her. As she considered the offer, Emma noticed something she hadn't expected, a subtle shift in herself, a curiosity about Margaret's vulnerability, a newfound awareness of the complexities of adult desire, loneliness, and human imperfection. For the first time, she saw Margaret not as a stern authority figure, but as a woman struggling with her own emotions, fears, and regrets. It was unsettling, yet it drew Emma closer, compelling her to listen, to understand, and to navigate this delicate situation with care. Margaret, sensing her hesitation, continued, her voice earnest and almost pleading, sharing how much she regretted her choices, how she longed to repair the cracks in her marriage, and how the family's well-being meant more than any fleeting attraction or mistake. Emma felt her heart tighten, torn between anger, compassion, and an unexpected fascination with the humanity before her. She realized that this was not a simple moral choice but a test of empathy, judgment, and the ability to see beyond surface mistakes. They talked long into the evening, words flowing between them in quiet, heartfelt confessions, the kind of raw honesty that only emerges when both parties understand the stakes and the fragility of trust. Emma asked questions, probed gently, and Margaret answered with sincerity, sometimes faltering, but always transparent in her intent to fix what had been broken. As the conversation wound down, Margaret's relief was palpable, and Emma could feel the beginnings of a fragile understanding forming between them, a bond forged not in shared joy, but in shared acknowledgement of mistakes and the careful navigation of consequences. Emma realized that by agreeing to keep the secret, she was not only protecting her family but also gaining insight into the human heart, into the way people love, fail, and seek redemption. Yet, beneath the relief and careful trust, there was also a subtle, undeniable tension, a magnetic, almost electric awareness of emotions that had never been part of her relationship with Margaret before. Emma sensed that life had shifted into a new rhythm, one where silence carried power, where choices shaped the emotional landscape of their family, and where every word, glance, and action would have to be measured with care. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her, the knowledge that a single misstep could unravel the fragile balance they were attempting to restore, but also a strange thrill at the realization that she held a key piece of influence over the family's future. Over the following days, Emma observed Margaret carefully, noting subtle changes in her demeanor. She was more attentive to Jason, kinder in conversation, more present during family gatherings, and increasingly reflective about her past actions. Margaret was making an effort to repair her relationships, not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of sincerity and warmth, and Emma found herself both impressed and emotionally moved by the transformation. At the same time, Emma couldn't ignore the quiet curiosity and fascination that had begun to grow within her, an awareness of depth, vulnerability, and complexity in a woman she had always seen as strong, rigid, and unshakable. Each encounter, each shared laugh, each moment of quiet understanding added layers to their connection, forming a new, delicate bond that neither of them could ignore. Emma understood that this was more than just protecting a secret, it was a journey into understanding human emotion, empathy, and the subtle power of compassion. And yet, despite the progress, a small, lingering tension remained, like a thread stretching quietly beneath the surface, hinting that the past was never fully gone, that mistakes, even when concealed and corrected, left echoes that shaped future interactions. Emma felt the responsibility of this knowledge deeply. It was a burden she had chosen, a silent pact she had entered into, and she recognized that the coming weeks would test her judgment, patience, and emotional resilience in ways she had never anticipated. And as she lay awake at night, reflecting on the conversation, she realized that the secret she carried had changed everything, not just in terms of her mother-in-law's actions, but in the way she viewed relationships, trust, and the fragile, unpredictable nature of human hearts. For the first time, Emma understood that silence, when wielded wisely, could be transformative, that empathy could coexist with judgment, and that careful, deliberate choices could create new possibilities even from the shadows of past mistakes. The world around her seemed the same, but inside, everything had shifted. An invisible, delicate thread connected her to Margaret now, a silent understanding that had the potential to reshape lives, hearts, and family dynamics forever, and Emma knew, with a strange mix of fear, awe, and anticipation, that the story was far from over. Emma spent the days following her conversation with Margaret in a state of quiet reflection, the weight of her secret pressing heavily on her chest, a mixture of responsibility, curiosity, and an unexpected fascination that she could neither ignore nor fully understand. She watched her mother-in-law more closely now, noticing the subtle ways Margaret tried to make amends without drawing attention, lingering smiles at Jason, gentle words that carried sincerity, small gestures of care that Emma had never seen before. It became clear that Margaret's request for silence was not about selfish protection but a desperate attempt to restore the bonds she had jeopardized. Emma found herself torn between judgment and empathy, aware that keeping the secret was not simply a choice of convenience but a moral test she had to navigate carefully. She realized that the silence she held could give Margaret the chance to repair her life, to seek redemption, and to regain the trust she had almost destroyed, and yet, it also placed Emma in a position of power she had never imagined having, one that made her reflect on the complexities of human relationships and the fragile nature of trust. Each family gathering became a delicate balancing act, with Emma observing interactions, listening to conversations, and gauging whether Margaret's efforts were genuine. She saw the vulnerability in her mother-in-law, a side she had never known, the way Margaret sometimes paused mid-laugh or looked distant as if weighing the consequences of every action. And in those moments, Emma felt a strange connection, a quiet understanding of the pressures and loneliness that had led Margaret down a path of temptation, and this empathy surprised her, stirring emotions that were both unsettling and deeply human. Emma began to notice changes in herself too, an awareness of subtle emotional shifts, a sensitivity to tension in the room, and a growing recognition that relationships were more complex than she had ever realized. She felt pride in Margaret's attempts to restore harmony but also a lingering sense of caution, a reminder that even the most sincere efforts could be fragile and easily undone. One afternoon, as she helped Margaret with some household tasks, Emma found herself in a rare moment of quiet intimacy, a conversation that drifted beyond surface topics into confessions of regrets, fears, and hopes. Margaret spoke of loneliness, of moments when she had felt invisible, of the longing for connection that had led her astray, and Emma listened, heart pounding, feeling a mixture of compassion and intrigue. She realized that Margaret's humanity, her flaws and vulnerabilities, made her more relatable than Emma had ever imagined, and this awareness deepened Emma's understanding of her own capacity for forgiveness and empathy. At the same time, Emma couldn't deny a subtle tension between them, a quiet energy that carried the weight of unspoken knowledge and mutual awareness. It was not inappropriate, yet it was undeniable, a delicate thread connecting two people who had once been separated by judgment and moral certainty. Emma understood that their silent agreement had created a new dynamic, one that required careful attention, sensitivity, and emotional intelligence. As weeks passed, Margaret continued to demonstrate her commitment to change, not through grand proclamations but through consistency in behavior, thoughtful gestures, and genuine engagement with Jason and the family. Emma observed how Jason responded, noting moments of warmth and connection that suggested Margaret's efforts were slowly rebuilding trust without revealing the secret that hung quietly in the background. Emma felt a sense of accomplishment, a reassurance that her choice to remain silent had allowed for positive transformation, and yet, she was also aware that the emotional landscape had shifted in ways she had not anticipated. The bond between her and Margaret, once distant and formal, had evolved into one of cautious trust and subtle understanding, an unspoken partnership built on the shared knowledge of past mistakes and the commitment to move forward with care. Emma found herself reflecting on the power of empathy, the strength of forgiveness, and the delicate balance between moral responsibility and human connection. She recognized that sometimes the right choice was not the easiest, that silence could be a tool for healing, and that trust, once broken, required time, patience, and conscious effort to restore. One evening, as she prepared dinner alongside Margaret, they shared a conversation that touched on hope, redemption, and the lessons learned from past mistakes. Emma felt her heart swell with a combination of admiration and emotional warmth, understanding that Margaret's journey of repair was not just about avoiding consequences but about embracing personal growth and accountability. There was a quiet satisfaction in witnessing this change, a sense of purpose in knowing that her decision to remain silent had allowed for transformation to occur. At the same time, Emma felt the lingering tension of unspoken emotions, an awareness of subtle admiration and curiosity that added complexity to their evolving relationship. It was a mix of responsibility, fascination, and emotional depth that neither could fully articulate, yet both understood in the silent language of shared experience. Emma realized that the affair, though a source of initial shock and turmoil, had inadvertently created an opportunity for growth, understanding, and the formation of a new emotional bond that was grounded in empathy, trust, and human vulnerability. The days continued in this delicate rhythm, with Emma observing, guiding, and reflecting, aware that each interaction carried significance, that each choice had consequences, and that the path forward required careful navigation of emotions, relationships, and moral considerations. She felt a profound sense of responsibility, a recognition of the power of knowledge, and an appreciation for the fragile yet resilient nature of human connections. Emma understood that the silent agreement she had forged with Margaret was more than a temporary arrangement. It was a transformative experience that reshaped her understanding of trust, forgiveness, and the complexity of the human heart. She felt the weight of the secret she carried, the depth of the emotional landscape she now inhabited, and the delicate balance required to maintain harmony while fostering growth and understanding. In quiet moments, she reflected on the nature of mistakes, the potential for redemption, and the surprising ways in which human connection could flourish even in the shadow of betrayal. Emma's perspective had shifted, revealing the depth of human emotion, the power of empathy, and the necessity of patience, observation, and careful judgment. She knew that the path ahead would continue to challenge her, that emotions would remain complicated, and that relationships would require constant care, yet she also felt a quiet optimism, a sense of purpose, and a growing appreciation for the intricate web of human hearts and the possibilities for healing that lay within it. And as the days turned into weeks, Emma realized that her role in this story was not simply to observe or protect but to engage, to guide, and to understand, embracing the subtle emotional shifts, the quiet confessions, and the transformative power of empathy and careful choice, knowing that the decisions she made now would shape not only her family's future but the depth of connection, trust, and emotional richness she could share with the people she loved, and that the secret she held, though heavy, had the power to change everything for the better if handled with wisdom, patience, and the courage to see humanity in its most vulnerable form. Months had passed since Emma made the quiet decision to remain silent about Margaret's secret, and in that time, life had slowly begun to regain a fragile sense of normalcy, yet nothing felt quite the same. The air carried a subtle tension and a quiet awareness of the unspoken, and Emma noticed how every interaction seemed layered with new meaning. Margaret, having honored her promise, worked tirelessly to rebuild her relationships, showing patience, kindness, and genuine engagement with Jason and the family, creating moments that reflected sincerity rather than pretense, and Emma found herself admiring this transformation more than she expected, feeling a complicated mixture of respect, curiosity, and emotional warmth toward her mother-in-law that she had never known before. Family gatherings, once merely routine, now carried a sense of subtle depth as Emma observed Margaret's careful attentiveness, the way she listened to Jason with genuine interest, laughed in measured joy, and seemed to approach every small task with intention, as if repairing not only her own bonds but also the unseen fractures within the family dynamic. And Emma realized that her choice to protect Margaret's secret had allowed this change to unfold organically, a transformation that might not have been possible under confrontation or accusation. Emma herself had changed during this time, learning patience, emotional discernment, and the quiet power of empathy. She discovered that seeing someone's vulnerability could foster unexpected connection, and she began to understand the complexity of human emotion in ways she had never anticipated, recognizing that people could fail, stumble, and yet still grow, heal, and seek redemption when given the chance. One evening, during a small family gathering, Emma found herself seated next to Margaret, sharing a quiet conversation that drifted into reflections on life, regrets, and hope for the future. The warmth of their words carried an intimacy that was rooted not in romance but in deep human understanding, an acknowledgement of past mistakes and the effort to move forward with honesty and care. Emma felt a strange lightness in her chest, a quiet satisfaction that came from seeing Margaret embrace her humanity, and a realization that the bond they shared, though unconventional and born of difficult circumstances, had grown into something meaningful and enduring, a silent pact of trust, respect, and understanding that transcended the awkwardness of past mistakes. At the same time, Emma was aware of the delicate tension that lingered just beneath the surface, the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared secret creating an invisible thread that connected them, shaping their interactions with a subtle intensity that was both thrilling and profound, a reminder that emotions, even when carefully managed, have a way of finding depth and resonance. Margaret's efforts to repair her marriage and her relationships within the family became increasingly evident, not through grand gestures but through everyday choices, small acts of attentiveness, and sincere expressions of care that slowly rebuilt the foundation of trust that had been shaken, and Emma, observing this transformation, felt a quiet pride, knowing that her silence had facilitated this growth, allowing Margaret the space and motivation to make meaningful changes. As weeks turned into months, Emma noticed the soft, unspoken gratitude in Margaret's eyes, moments of warmth that reflected acknowledgement of Emma's role in preserving the family's harmony, and the realization dawned that this experience had altered their relationship forever, creating a bond that was intimate and understanding but rooted in respect and shared experience rather than conventional closeness. Emma's perception of Margaret shifted entirely. She saw a woman capable of vulnerability, reflection, and growth, and she felt a renewed sense of compassion and admiration that made their interactions richer, more nuanced, and emotionally resonant. During quiet moments at home, Emma reflected on the journey they had shared, the shock of discovery, the weight of choice, the careful navigation of trust and morality, and the transformation that had resulted from empathy, patience, and conscious action, and she realized that her understanding of family, love, and human connection had deepened profoundly. There was also a subtle recognition within Emma of the power inherent in knowledge, in choosing when to speak and when to remain silent, and an understanding that every decision carried consequences that could ripple outward in unexpected ways, and she marveled at how a moment of potential chaos had become an opportunity for healing, growth, and stronger, more authentic bonds. As the family gathered for a quiet dinner one evening, laughter and gentle conversation filling the room, Emma caught a glance from Margaret, a fleeting but unmistakable acknowledgement of the journey they had shared, and she felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and an almost tender admiration, realizing that their relationship had been irrevocably reshaped by honesty, discretion, and a willingness to understand each other's humanity. It was in these small, intimate moments that Emma felt the true power of her choice, the way careful, thoughtful action could transform fear and pain into understanding, tension into connection, and mistakes into opportunities for growth. She reflected on the fragile nature of trust, the resilience of love, and the unexpected ways in which people could change when given the chance and guided with empathy, and she felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that her actions, though silent and unseen, had made a real difference in the lives of those she loved. Even as she recognized the lingering complexities of human emotion, the subtle undercurrents of attraction, curiosity, and respect that colored her interactions with Margaret, Emma embraced the reality of the situation, understanding that life was never simple, relationships were rarely clean-cut, and that the depth of connection often arose from navigating challenges, confronting imperfections, and choosing compassion over judgment. She felt the quiet satisfaction of watching a family heal, of seeing a woman reclaim her dignity and honor, and of knowing that she had played a part in fostering that change, all while learning more about herself, her capacity for empathy, and her understanding of human hearts. As the evening ended and Emma prepared for the calm of the night, she reflected on how much had changed since that first rainy afternoon, how the initial shock had transformed into trust, respect, and an unexpected bond, and how the delicate thread of silence had, in fact, led to deeper connection, emotional growth, and a more resilient sense of family. And as she finally lay down to rest, Emma felt a quiet peace, a sense of closure and hope, and a recognition that life, with all its unpredictability, mistakes, and hidden truths, had a way of teaching lessons in patience, compassion, and understanding, and that the choices she had made, careful, considered, and guided by empathy, had changed everything, not through confrontation or punishment, but through the gentle, transformative power of human connection, trust, and love that could endure even the most unexpected challenges.